So welcome back to the Low-Tech Garage. Today we're going to be tackling replacing the windshield wiper motor on our 94 F150. Summertime here in Florida. Along with that we get the afternoon thunderstorms, and the other day coming back the wipers started, I'll say, behaving a bit erratically, going slow, wouldn't start, wouldn't stop, and then they quit. And there's a check you can do where you can take the plastic cover off the wiper motor. There's some contacts in there. You can check that those are clean and bent so that they're making good contact. I did go ahead and do that check, so for those of you who know, sometimes that'll fix it. Unfortunately for this go around it didn't, so I ended up having to get a replacement motor, and today we're going to show you what's involved in replacing that. So the wiper motor is pretty looking in like plain sight there, right on the firewall, so it kind of looks like it's straightforward. In the end the job is straightforward, but there's quite a lot you have to dismantle so you can get in behind the cowl and disconnect the old one from the mechanism that drives the actual wipers themselves. So I'm actually going to start with the hood shut and remove the wiper blades, the cowl cover. So we're going to take a look at doing that first. Okay, so the wiper blades, as far as removing those, essentially there's this little clip that you'll see, and what you have to do is you have to pull the wiper blade forward up off the windshield, and then once you do that you can get a pair of pliers on it like this, pull it up a little bit more, and then you can see this tab kind of stops the blade from going back. Once you've done that, then you just got to wiggle the blade and it'll come right off. Next we're going to go ahead and remove the antenna. So that's slacken this, and then the actual antenna itself will just unscrew, and then you want to just pop the little chrome cover off here, and then there's some screws under there. Undo those, and that's going to loosen the antenna connection. It's going to make it easier to move, the cowl panel around. And that's the base of the antenna. Once the chrome panel's off, you can see the 4 screws there that we're going to just go ahead and undo. And then once you've undone the 4 screws, you can see how you can pop the base out here, and then the cable, it just pulls right out from inside of here. Okay, and then next up, you can see this hole on the cowl. There's a crosshead screw in here, and as you look across, there's actually 5 of those. We're going to go ahead and unscrew those next, being careful to not drop them down inside the cowl. And with the screws on the top undone, now you can see, there's a row of screws along here that are kind of holding this seal, but also actually hold, the cowl panel in place. So we're going to have to go ahead and undo all of those. So undoing those screws under the hood will let you remove this seal or weather strap, and it's important piece because it does actually keep a lot of rain from getting onto the components that are at the back end of the engine bay. If it's anything like our truck, it was full of debris, so I very carefully removed it, and then once I got it away from the truck, actually used like a stiff little brush, got it all cleaned up. It's got a couple splits in it, but you know what, still serviceable, so I'm going to reuse it. If you've got a friend helping, actually removing the hood makes the cowl removal a lot more straightforward. You've just got the bolts here on the bracket. Always remember to mark, with a Sharpie or some tape, the location of the hinge on the hood. If you do that, and it makes it so much easier to put it back the exact same place it came off. If you're doing it by yourself, not so straightforward. It is possible to get the cowl out, a lot of wiggling around and fooling with the angle of the hood. Also, don't forget to disconnect this guy because it's hooked in to the cowl, and will slow you up as well. So once the cowl's free, you can actually get it to where, let me step back a little bit, you can kind of see it's just propped up against the windshield and completely out of the way. When you're doing that, just remember you got the windscreen washer connection here. No need to disconnect it. You can do this whole job without doing that, but just don't pull too hard on this end and dislodge that without realizing, because it would be annoying to put this all back together again and then find your washers were filling up the cowl rather than going on the windshield. Next up, if we move over to the middle here, you can kind of see that black and white dotted panel. There's a couple screws that you can get to through this gap, and then if I come around and we look under the hood, you can also see on this edge there's some screws as well. So next up, we've got to remove that because that's the sort of protector panel that's on top of the actual mechanism of the wipers. Okay, now we're ready to start putting the new motor in place. We just undid the 3 bolts, wiggled the new one out. Sorry, the old one out. The new one just, goes through the hole in the firewall there. I started off just putting 1 bolt in at the top corner there loosely, and then that gives you some maneuvering to let you put the operating rods for the 2 different wipers onto that pin sticking out at the back. You want to slide the passenger one on first and then the driver's side one. Once those are both on, you want to replace that spring clip that we had removed with the screwdriver. Okay, so with the clip back on, next thing is to hook up the 2 electrical connectors, which is these guys. Take a look in the end, see if there's any sign of corrosion. These ones actually look pretty good, a little grubby, but that's all. But this is a good moment to find out if you've got any corrosion in there, and if so, well, it's kind of a pain. You can dismantle these, clean that up, put it back together again before you plug them in. So so once you snap the 2 electrical connectors back in there, you got those bolts tight on the firewall. Actually, the good thing to do before you put the wipers back on and the cowl in is hop in the truck and see if you can hear that motor run. Okay, so we've got the ignition on, coming down to the wiper switch here. And yeah, that's great. Can hear, I don't know if you could hear it, hopefully you can hear it in the video, but the motor was coming on, you could hear it stopping and starting for intermittent. So it looks like that solved the problem. All you got to do now is put the cowl back on, put that seal back on the back end of the hood, and we'll be good to go. So to put the cowl back, what I found worked was actually having the hood open at that angle and starting with the passenger side, get that popped in, hooked under here, and then once it's all forward like this, go around on the other side. And then what we're going to have to do is, you can see here this gap, this edge just tucks under that seal. Okay, and then once you've got it flat, again you can see what I mean, tuck the leading edge just under here. It only goes under about 1/4 of an inch, but make sure you get it tucked the whole way across. And then what you want to make sure as you're doing it is that this tab on the cowl is on the outside of the little bracket that the screw goes into. So once you've done that on both sides, I'd recommend putting the screws just loosely into these, and that's going to basically locate the cowl in the position it's got to be in. Okay, and then once you've got the cowl tucked back in under this edge and sitting nicely, where we can get some screws into it, I recommend connecting the radio antenna back up, just so we don't forget about that. So plug the cable into the base of this thing, put this in. It'll only go one way round. There's a peg that locates it, so that's a good job Ford doing that. And then we just put the chrome trim back on. Snaps in place like this. And after that, we're going to come around and now replace the screws all along that edge, remembering to put the seal along that gutter in while we do it. So as you're putting the screws back in the cowl, we've got this trim to go back on, which is essentially a seal, for the hood. You'll notice there's this little channel in it, and that goes over the seam where the cowl meets the sheet metal of the firewall. So just make sure that this pops nicely over that. And as with all these things, really good idea to just put the screws in loosely all the way along till you get them all started, and then just come back around and tighten them up. And then finally, you remember we had popped this wire holder out. Snap that back in. That'll keep the cable nice and tight. And then finally finish up putting the other screws in these holes on the cowl. And a tip for that is they're a little tricky to line up initially. I take a long thin screwdriver, just a real skinny screwdriver or something with a sharp point, put it in there and work it around. You can find by doing that you can line the screws up, and really once you got one of them lined up like that, actually the rest of them are all going to be just fine. Okay, and then finally we'll just screw the antenna post in here and put the wipers back on. Run the wiper motor and let it self-park, and then that will let you make sure you put the wipers on in the correct place. I took this opportunity to paint the arms on mine. They were looking a little shabby, so I'm sure you can imagine putting those back on, and then that's a successful job. So as always, we really appreciate you taking time to come out and see what we're doing at the Low Tech Garage. We've got a variety of vehicles, everything from the day-to-day to the exotic, and we love all of them. They all have their place. If you like this, please subscribe, and we'll see you again soon.